Kitco News coverage of FreedomFest is brought to you by Coin Payments, crypto payments made easy.
Hello, I'm Michelle Makori coming to you from Las Vegas for FreedomFest 2022. And joining me now is the one and only Zuby, rapper, author, and speaker, to speak about everything from CBDCs to Bitcoin to kids' books to gender roles to weightlifting. So a lot of ground to cover. Thank you so much for joining us, Zuby. Great to have you.
Hello, happy to be here.
Well, it's great to be here at FreedomFest with you, Zuby. Now, I want to start off our conversation with something that is arguably antithetical to the whole idea of freedom, and that is a central bank digital currency, or a CBDC. You've been quite vocal about government overreach, and many would argue that a CBDC is going to lead to exactly that. And we're seeing a trend that they're gaining traction in terms of the number of countries looking at adopting them. In fact, 105 countries are actively exploring a CBDC. Now, that is a massive surge from 2 years ago when only 35 countries were looking into the idea. And 50 countries are actually in an advanced exploration phase of CBDCs, and that's the latest data from the Atlantic Council's CBDC tracker. Now, as we said, CBDC, central bank digital currency, still tied to fiat, of course. But before we get into the philosophical issues here and the ideological issues here, why don't we start off with you helping our viewers understand what exactly a CBDC is?
Well, central bank digital currency sort of says what it is on the title. It's a digital only currency that is issued by a central bank and which is controlled by that entity. So the real danger about this is that rather than really being a form of money, it could be viewed, I think, more like a token or a voucher that could potentially only be used by people who they want it to be used by, and only for purchases that they want it to be used by. So if you think with a typical currency, if you have a dollar, you have a pound, you have a euro, you can exchange that with anyone who is willing to accept it for any product or service. It could be legal, it could be illegal, it could be anything, but you have complete control over that. But with a CBDC, there is the potential that they could limit it to certain types of purchases, or perhaps if you behave in a way that they don't want you to, they could perhaps even stop that token from working for that particular individual or group. So in terms of what it is, I think on a basic level, it seems like it's a normal currency, but the difference is in the programmability. Because when it can be programmed, that means that it can be more controlled by those entities, and it cannot be exchanged as freely and used as freely as another form of currency.
Right, and of course it's also just a digital version of fiat currency, where central banks still have all of the levers of control that they would typically have, just as you mentioned, on a digital level, even more so. Now, I know you've been a very vocal critic of social credit systems. China, one of the first countries to come out with a central bank digital currency. They're currently in their second phase of the launch. Iran is actually planning on launching one in August, and perhaps it's no coincidence that it's regimes that have, let's say, a less than favorable record of human rights that are coming first and foremost with this. But going back to the idea of social credit, how do you see CBDCs and social credit systems enabling each other?
Well, I touched on that. So, for example, if you had a social credit score, as they do in China, then what's considered misbehavior on your part, or non-politically correct behavior, it could be speaking out against the government, it could be crossing a road where you're not supposed to, that type of minor infraction, it could be hanging out with the wrong person, it could be paying your taxes too late. Whatever it is, what this would potentially enable is for them to punish you financially and limit your financial freedom based on whether or not they consider you are going along with whatever they want you to go along with. So in the current system, of course, people can be fined. There can be asset seizures and things like that for when people don't pay up on taxes and that sort of thing. But in this case, it would mean that you have a currency and you can't go and spend it in a shop, or you're not allowed to use it to buy a plane ticket, or you can't use it to buy a train ticket, or so on. So there's no limit to how a potentially authoritarian or even tyrannical government could control and limit and monitor your behavior based on that. They'd also have a complete record of all of your purchases. That's another part that we haven't spoken about. So this is very dangerous technology when these two things combine. We're moving to a stage, I think we've been doing this for the past few decades, where as the world becomes more developed and as countries become more developed, we kind of reach various forks in the road where we can allow technology to be used to free us or to enslave us. And with these technologies that we are discussing, I think these are technologies that can be used to enslave people. This can be communism 2.0 or communism 3.0, where it's not how it was in the 1900s, but actually that technology, rather than liberating people, as it has to some degree in the past, it actually enslaves people. I thought about this a lot over the past 2.5 years when you think about the concepts such as lockdowns. This whole pandemic response would not have been possible 20 years ago. It couldn't have happened, and no one ever makes that point. It was the technology that made it possible. 20 years ago, you couldn't tell people just do Zoom meetings, work from home, children can do remote learning. What the heck is remote learning? What the heck are Zoom meetings? What's work from home? That wasn't even possible as recently as 20 years ago. And in many parts of the world, it wasn't possible. It wasn't an option. And that's part of why many places didn't have this severity of the lockdowns and the stay-at-home orders. So I think as we advance in society, I think this about many things. I think this even with AI and robotics and things like that, we need to be very careful that we do not become slaves to our own technologies.
Well, you raised an interesting point about not being able to buy train tickets or plane tickets. That's already part of the Chinese social credit punishment. If you misbehave, for example, if you sneeze on the train and you don't cover your mouth or you don't wear a mask, you can be banned from taking the train. But one of the concerns that we're hearing about is how this idea of climate change and carbon emissions and a digital currency could all interlink. So for example, we've tracked that you've bought 20 plane tickets this year. Zuby, you've exceeded your carbon offset limit for the year, and therefore you're banned from buying future plane tickets, or you'll have to buy them with a premium. That's another one of the big concerns here. And again, you mentioned privacy, and of course, the central bank will be able to see every single transaction that you make, so complete lack of privacy there. And the concern is, of course, that this is a move to eliminate cash from the system, so you wouldn't even have that as an alternative. So we're here in the US. How afraid should we be of FedCoin? We know that the Fed has been looking at it. They've released a paper. They're actually currently having it open for the public to submit comments and thoughts. Vice Chair Brennan said that it's essential to maintain the dollar's supremacy and role in the international monetary system. Jay Powell saying that it'll be something that Congress needs to take a look at. Should FedCoin happen?
No. No, people don't want this. Nobody asked for any of this. And one of the biggest realizations of the past 2.5 years I've had, and some people may not like me saying this, but this notion that we live in truly democratic systems and countries or truly liberal countries it's a facade. It's a facade. I mean, the mask completely came off, pardon the pun, over the past 2.5 years. And I think people need to take the power back. I think that the power ultimately always lies with the general population. It always lies with the individuals. And all of these moves and notions with CBDCs and social credit scores, I'm not seeing people out there advocating for this. I'm not seeing people anywhere on the political spectrum saying, yeah, this is what we want. We want central bank digital currencies. We want this, we want that. And it's all being forced down from the top, often by people who are not even elected. There's nothing democratic about it in the slightest.
So how do people take the power back?
Buy Bitcoin and resist. Honestly, people need to learn that they're allowed to say no. You can say no.
Violent resistance?
No, I would recommend civil disobedience, peaceful protest, and just saying no, just not going along with things and not using things that you don't want to use and you don't want to support. When it comes to currencies, I mean, you really have to some degree a choice, especially with the rise of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin in particular. People have an option with where they want to put their trust, where they want to put their energy, because that's really what money is. It's energy. And it's, of course, it's a medium of exchange, but just like with any other technology, the market really decides what technology wins. The currency that rises in value and which becomes more powerful and becomes more widely adopted is the one that people choose to use.
Well, you still have the idea of government overreach into Bitcoin, for example, with regulations coming. Some have already been established. How do you see Bitcoin fitting in with the CBDC? Do you see that pushing more the move towards Bitcoin?
I think that they are, to me, these things are polar opposites.
Yeah.
I think one of them is designed to liberate and one of them is designed to enslave. And a government or a central bank is never going to come out and say, "Hey, we're trying to enslave you, or we're trying to have more control and power over you." They're never going to say that. They're going to say, "This is for your own good. This is for your health. This is for your safety. This is for your security." As you said earlier, they'll try to tie it to environmentalism and diversity and equity and inclusion. They'll somehow manage to throw all their buzzwords into it to make it sound good and to make it appeal to a certain type of person. But I think this is a dangerous system and a dangerous technology. And honestly, I think people should just say no to it.
Well, let's talk about Bitcoin, because that is something that you've said yes to.
Yes.
In fact, you're wearing Bitcoin socks, as you showed me earlier. We'll get a close-up of those. Is Bitcoin becoming more and more part of the centralized traditional financial system? In the sense that people have been wanting institutional adoption because that would get the price of Bitcoin up. There's been a push for Bitcoin ETFs, Bitcoin spot ETFs, all of these derivative products structured around Bitcoin. Is it in danger of becoming part of the traditional financial system, which is centralized, and therefore, in a way, violating its core principle of being decentralized as we move towards bigger institutional adoption?
I think it's a reasonable and it's a very reasonable question and potential concern. I think that Bitcoin is resilient enough to handle that. I think that part of the point of it, if you have liberty, if you have freedom, then that doesn't even mean that the government is necessarily excluded, right? Institutions, just like the average individual can buy Bitcoin, governments also have the ability to buy Bitcoin. Large businesses, small businesses have the ability to buy Bitcoin. I don't know if that, I think there's different ways to look at it. I think that could be looked at as a potential threat or a means of further centralization. I think it could also be looked at as a sign of positive adoption as to, hey, okay, rather than trying to crush this technology, this is even being adopted by the legacy system to some degree, just as it is by all the young and more innovative people.
Does it open it up to more manipulation then?
Probably. The truth is every market is open to manipulation. I think the Bitcoin market and the cryptocurrency market as a whole, for many, many years, probably from its inception, has been subject to manipulation, even if it's just by people who are considered whales, who hold a large amount of the currency. So whether that's private individuals or it's public entities, that's always a concern, but it's also a concern with the stock market. It's a potential concern with real estate. I think it's a concern with anything.
But when we look at the opening line of the original Bitcoin white paper, and that says a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. Do you think that Bitcoin has deviated a bit from its original purpose? do you think that it's now become more of a speculative asset and an investment vehicle?
I think it's all the above. I think everyone who's in the world of Bitcoin is in it for a slightly different reason, and everyone has a slightly different understanding of it. You have people who think that this is the most important technology and most thing with the most potential to shift the world and fix so many of the financial, social, cultural, and political problems, right? I'm sure you've heard the term, people say, Bitcoin fixes this, and they say that to almost everything. So you have people who are essentially technological evangelists for this thing, and they think that this is what is the key to freeing humanity as a whole. On other ends, you have people who are simply traders, right?
Yeah.
They're just trying to increase their dollar amount. They're trying to trade the swings. They're day traders. You have people who are invested in Bitcoin as well as multiple other cryptocurrencies. You have people who consider themselves Bitcoin maximalists who are only all in on Bitcoin. Some people are in it for personal gain. Some people for social change. Some people to reduce the risk of wars and foreign interference. Other people want to bank the unbanked in developing countries. Some people, it's a combination of all of these things or even more things. So just like, I mean, if you take a traditional currency, if you take dollars or pounds, I mean, what is the purpose of the dollar? I think different people have and use dollars in different ways. And it's not necessary, it can't even if you had a central banking entity as you do with the dollar, even they cannot determine exactly how dollars are used. They would probably like criminals not to use them.
Right.
But
well, I guess it's more of a way that we should be, viewing Bitcoin, and we are at a libertarian conference.
Sure.
So how do you view Bitcoin fitting in with libertarian principles and ideologies?
Well, I think one of the core things with libertarian philosophy and Bitcoin is, of course, decentralization of power. Decentralization of power. I mean, money is energy. Energy is power. So decentralized money is something that completely fits in with libertarian ideals, rather than having governments, the state, central banks controlling everything, controlling the entire monetary policy, and having very large institutions being in charge of all transactions, or even halting them or freezing them or reversing them. Again, look at the last couple of years. We saw in Canada, people got their bank accounts frozen for participating in anti-lockdown protests and so on and so forth. So I think anything that takes power away from the state and puts it back in the hands of the individual is in line with libertarianism. And I think also the notion of personal responsibility that comes with Bitcoin, holding your own keys to hold your own coins, being in charge of your private key, and really being the person who holds that, not outsourcing it to another entity. Yeah. I think that's very much in line with libertarian ideals, because it's not just about freedom. I think when people talk about libertarian ideals or even conservative ideals, the focus is always on liberty and freedom and don't tell me what to do and anti-statism. But a core part of it, which can't be lost, is also the responsibility and the accountability aspect. And I think that Bitcoin helps to teach responsibility and accountability. I mean, it completely changes the accounting system, which can even limit the amount of fraud that goes on in various entities. Right. And I think all of these are very much in line with the idea.
Well, you take the ideas that you believe in, like personal responsibility and self-determination, and you rap about them. I mean, essentially, of course, that is one of your primary gigs other than weighing in on CBDCs, and that's harking back to your background studying computer science in Oxford. So you're qualified to discuss a number of issues, but I now want to focus on your music career. And you do use that as a forum to discuss the various issues that you see in society, including censorship and cancel culture. And let's chat about your song, Okay Dude, which was in response to you getting banned from Twitter. Give us the background there before we get into the ideologies.
Yeah, sure. Man, this is going to sound so weird. So this goes back to 2020. It's probably the most ridiculous Twitter suspension of all time. So I had written a list and it was, let me remember what it was. It was like 5 pieces of advice for single women to get a great guy.
I'm going to have to get those tips from you later, but yeah.
And it was going viral. It was going viral. Lots of people approved of it. Some people disapproved. It became this thing on Twitter, millions of people saw it. And one person, another verified account, responded to it and said something along the lines of, oh, this is terrible advice, and I bet I sleep with more women than you do or something. And I just responded to it and I said, okay, dude. And that was it. A week later, I was on a train and I got an email from Twitter, the Twitter safety team, telling me that I'd been locked out of my account for hateful conduct. It had said that, you may not discriminate, threaten, or harass people based on their race, ethnicity, religion, nationality, disability, sexual preferences, so on and so forth. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I don't do that, and I haven't done that. And then it was like, this was the tweet we believe violated our hateful conduct policy. Okay, dude. So I'm confused here. I don't know if this was some algorithmic failure on Twitter's part. I didn't know if I was being trolled or it was some type of scam. I tried to log into Twitter and my account is locked. I've never experienced this before. I'm locked out of my account. I just get a screen saying your account is locked. And so I appealed it. Obviously, I haven't done anything wrong, so I make an appeal. And it got manually reviewed and it was upheld. It was said, we've reviewed this and we have determined that your tweet, okay, dude, violates our hateful conduct policy. So in order for me to get my Twitter account back, I had to delete this offensive tweet. So long story short, that happened. It kind of blew up. Hashtag free Zuby, hashtag okay dude were trending on Twitter for the days that I was suspended. I came back. First video I posted was me dancing with a t-shirt on it, which just said okay dude on it. I ended up selling hundreds and hundreds of okay dude t-shirts. I made a song called Okay Dude, which ended up becoming one of my most popular songs to date. Shot a music video for it. And so the whole thing ended up actually being quite a boost to my career and being rather lucrative. So,
well, of course, it's very problematic how Twitter, which is essentially the public square in this day and age, can just ban anyone. And we know that was one of the reasons that Elon Musk was looking at acquiring Twitter. We'll see how that one plays out. But through your song, Okay Dude, you do put out various political messages. Give us the gist of what Okay Dude is about.
Wow, I just wanted to get stuff off my chest. So for me, in 2019, things really, really started to grow for me in my music career. 2019 was this inflection point where stuff went from growing really, really slowly to just spiking. To give people an idea, beginning of 2019, I had about 50,000 followers across all my social media. As we speak today, that number is about 1.5 million. So in the past 3.5 years, things have just rocketed up for me in various regards. And my last piece of music came out in the beginning of 2019 before this spark had happened. So in 2020, I had a lot of attention, hundreds of thousands of people following me, millions of people discovering me, but I hadn't put out any music at all during that time period. So Okay Dude was my first song back after having this sort of rise in notoriety. And then of course having this Twitter suspension. So I just wanted to vocalize and air out a lot of the things that I was thinking about. So there are references to the pandemic. There's references to some of my socio-political views that people have challenged me on. There's references to celebrities self-censoring themselves, increased political polarization. All of these things are mentioned in a three-minute song, essentially. So I would recommend people just go and listen to the song because it really speaks for itself. But I'm not someone who considers my music politically charged. I don't typically make socio-politically charged music. But on that song, there's a bunch of stuff that was on my chest and things that were floating around in my mind that I just wanted to put out there.
All right, so you don't consider music as a tool to change the narrative, or your music at least?
Well, it can be to change the narrative, but I don't consider myself hyper-political. Even with what I do, let alone in my music, I consider myself much more involved in the socio-cultural sphere than in the political sphere. I don't rap or talk or even tweet that much directly about politics. You'll never see me mention the GOP or Democrats or Republicans.
Parties per se, but
No.
but issues of the day, issues that weave their way into politics, like gender roles and pronouns.
To me, that's social. Everything. We live in an age where things are being politicized.
So do you use your music then as a way to create social awareness? Is that fair to say?
Potentially, I use it to say what I want to say. My goal with my music isn't directly about creating social awareness. I don't consider myself an activist.
Just a form of expression.
Yeah, it's the way I want to express myself, just like I would in a conversation or I would in a podcast. It's just a creative way of me doing that.
Well, it certainly resonates with a lot of people. And Zuby, amongst your many, many accomplishments, you are also the breaker of the women's deadlifting record. You broke that.
Yeah.
Women's deadlifting record, and you shot yourself doing so.
Mm-hmm.
And without any training, might I add, as you stressed.
Well, I've trained over the years. Let's be honest. But
Okay, fair enough.
feet, I didn't really need to. Men and women are different. We are a sexually dimorphic species. Everybody on this planet who lives right now and who's ever existed was birthed from a woman. Men are not women. Women are not men.
Well, Senator Hawley recently accused of being transphobic just for making that statement, accused of fostering violence against the trans community for stating that fact, got himself into quite a bit of trouble from the
Well,
left.
if you get in trouble for stating the truth, then so be it. But this is reality. Everyone knows it's reality, even those who refuse to say it or those who choose to deny it. There are few things more basic than this when it comes to biology and science. Men and women are built differently. This is why sports are sex segregated and should be, because men are physically stronger and faster and bigger than women are. There's all sorts of differences in our bodies. And that's fine and that's good, because if that didn't exist, none of us would be here. And my point was simply making that. It was just showing, hey, you know, because people who push this ideology, if you ask them what a woman is, their answer will be anyone who identifies as a woman. So I said, okay, well, I identify as a woman, so I'm going to go and destroy the British women's deadlift record. I did the bench press one while I was at it as well, because it wasn't very hard. So what's the point? Yes, men and women are different, and here is why this idea is silly. So, but if, according to the people's own rules, the ideologues' own rules, if they say that I'm not really a woman, if I'm identifying as one, they're the ones who are being quote unquote transphobic in their own terms. And if I really am a woman, then yes, I am the British women's deadlift record holder. So it's either one or the two.
Yeah.
There's no other way around it.
Highlighting the hypocrisy there and absurdity, and it got picked up by Tucker Carlson. It shot you into an even bigger spotlight.
Female privilege, eh?
Yeah, female privilege. I guess that's the way you could look at it. Yeah, female privilege got you more international acclaim. Another issue that you've been focused on is this idea of meritocracy, and one of your recent tweets really resonated with me. You wrote, people like to talk about wage gaps, income gaps, and wealth gaps, but they never talk about skill gaps, effort gaps, and talent gaps.
Nor interest gaps, nor many other types of gaps that we could talk about. So the point there is just, I'm not interested in, people have this weird obsession with focusing on gaps and doing the most superficial and silly and nonsensical analysis of why it is. People do this with gender gaps and racial gaps. I mean, I don't know how they do it with gender gaps if they don't even believe that men and women are real things or merely social constructs. But there's this obsession in Western society, especially Anglosphere countries, of just analyzing gaps and assuming that any gap existing means that there's some type of discrimination or bigotry taking place. And this is so silly. And people only do it in certain areas and with certain things and in certain directions and with people with things that suit their current agenda. And the point of that tweet is just saying, yeah, look, people are different. People have different interests. People have different talents. Some people put in more effort than others. Some people work harder than others. Some people, yes, are born into better socioeconomic positions than others. And people also just have different interests. You can't have freedom. You can't advocate for freedom of choice and equality of outcome. They're antithetical. You can't embrace diversity and then get mad that people choose different things and people have different interests and people land in different areas, which leads to all different types of inequalities. That's how life is. You can't say, unless you wanted to just flatten the entirety of humanity and turn everyone into drones where everyone does the exact same job and is paid the exact same wage and is forced to have you can't do that without absolute tyranny. If you allow men and women to make choices, you allow individuals to make choices, people are going to make different choices, and that leads to different outcomes, and that's fine. It's not a problem. It's actually a good thing. So you have many people in our society who are trying to fix problems that don't exist, and in doing so, they're in fact creating problems. So that was really the crux of what I was saying with that tweet in many more words.
Yeah, well, it certainly resonated on several levels. Finally, amongst your many accomplishments, you're also an author. And you've just released a new book, The Candy Calamity, a kid's book, by the way. Give us the gist of that.
Yeah, sure. So my children's book, The Candy Calamity, candycalamity.com, go check it out. It's a collaboration with a company called Brave Books. The ethos of the book is all about health and fitness and the importance of taking care of your body. As you've alluded to, I'm big on personal responsibility. I'm a big fan of lifting weights, going to the gym, staying in shape. I wrote a book for grown-ups called Strong.
Become the women's deadlift record breaker without that.
You got to work for it. Yeah. You got to work for it. And so I wanted to write a book that was fun, positive, aimed primarily at the, I'd say, 5 to 10-year-old age range. And the book is totally apolitical. I want to make that point as well. It's just about health, fitness, having self-control, being disciplined, taking care of yourself, why eating right is important, why exercise is important. It all rhymes, and the illustrations are amazing. It's a really fun story. So if that sounds appealing, you can go to candycalamity.com or bravebooks.com, and people can check out the book. We had a lot of fun creating it, and I'm excited to get it out to thousands of people.
All right, well, I've had a lot of fun chatting with you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for sharing your insights with us across a range of topics. Great to have you, Zuby.
Appreciate it.
Kitco News coverage of FreedomFest is brought to you by Coin Payments, crypto payments made easy.